makes their own decisions and everybody makes their own choices, but they're not the only ones that suffer the consequences.
Jill Duggar and her husband, Derek Dillard, are ready to share their story. Their new book, Counting the Cost, promises to reveal the unedited truth about the Duggars.
For as long as I can remember, there was this sense of bewilderment with people looking at our family and just seeing all of us lined up in red dresses, out at wherever, and are they all yours?
Welcome down the rabbit hole, friend. I've been spending a lot of time going back through the book. I was supposed to review chapter 3 tonight, but I'm actually going to be skipping ahead to talk about the last chapter of Jill's book. It's the chapter that actually made me cry. I had a difficult time letting go, taking deep breaths, and had to kind of back away from it as I finished the book. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that here tonight, and we will also start the very beginning of chapter 3. So let's get into it, friends. And with this book, Counting the Cost, I'm actually counting the last chapter as the epilogue, okay? The epilogue is entitled A Photo. Here's the amazing photo of Jilly Muffin. December 1995. The reason that I've been moved to talk about this last chapter is because I saw that a lot of people were commenting on some of Jill's sisters and brothers' social media accounts. I was just witnessing a lot of hatred being spewed towards members of Jill's family. And I think people are wrongfully doing it in the name of this book. And I want to let you know that I think nothing could be more wrong, and there could be no worse interpretation of Jill's words than to assume that she hates her family. And I think the epilogue makes that ever more clear. It also made me think a lot about how we all read this book and respond to things about the Duggars from our own point of view that's fully informed by our own story, our own background, the environment that we grew up in. And I was thinking a lot about myself, my own life, and how I bring all of that to the table when I read this book. And I challenge you to think about how that applies to your situation as well. One thing that came up for me a lot when reading this book, and some of you may be shocked and think I'm crazy, is I had a lot of feelings of envy. I was envying Jill because there are so many times in the book when awful things are going on and it's really hard, but Jill seems to find a lot of support in her life from her brothers, sisters, and parents. It may not be the kind of support that all of us want to have. I've said before that Jill talks about feeling like she couldn't speak openly as she wanted to with her family. But let's say she's moving into a new house or she's having some problem with having to have a C-section. It's like people show up for her. Her family shows up for her. And I've shared with all of you that my grandparents raised me. My grandfather died when I was 8, and then I just had my grandmother. And there's so many times that I've wanted to have people that were like family for me and have them show up for me. And I've been lucky to make a few really good friends in my life that I do consider family, but I've never had anything like what Jill describes in this book. So that's my own personal situation that I bring to reading every chapter in here, as much as I'm taken aback by the horrible things that were happening in the background and a lot of the things that Jill's describing to us about her interaction with her parents. I can't help but have my views shaded by the life that I've led and the things that have psychologically affected me. So I just wonder, and I hope that when Jill or Jessa or Joy go to their social media and they see that someone wrote them a comment, be it good or bad, I wonder if they realize that whatever that comment is, even if it comes from someone like me, it's going to be shaded by our own view of the world, our own insecurities, our own background, the environment that we grew up in. It's actually not all about them. Our hatred or love or fandom for the Duggars, it's not really about them. It's about us and what we are looking for in life and what we interpret about their situation. I constantly go through YouTube looking to see if there are any members of the IBLP who are responding to Jill's book. I found a couple of them, and I'll try to link some of the videos below because I find them extremely interesting because, again, their interpretation of what we're both reading can be so different from mine because it's shaded by what happened to them in their life. I challenge you, as you read the book or as you watch some of my videos and other people's videos, if what you're hearing brings up like certain thoughts and feelings in your heart, to kind of think about why. Like, why do I feel this way? Because Jill, in my opinion, is writing this book for herself to show us her truth. You know, if it brings up in you certain feelings, like for me, the crying and the family, they did care about her and she does love her family. Well, that's because I'm looking at it through my lens. If it brings up in you, this family is complete trash, I can't believe they would do this to her. And like, I think that that's also because you're looking at it through your lens as well. And I like all of our lenses. I like to hear from all of us and see what we're doing. But right now, I want to talk to you about the epilogue. A photo. All right. Prior to the epilogue, we hear so much about all of the financial, I'm going to say, abuses that happened to Jill and Derek, unfortunately by Jill's father, Jim Bob. All the challenges they came across, all the difficulties that they have, the way that Jill's parents seem very staunch in their station. They refuse to bend, be flexible, to yield. They just refuse to work with Jill and Derek, and it seems so unfair. We also hear about all of the many times that once again, Jill kind of gets screwed over by having officials come and try to talk to her about what happened years ago, to try to help in her brother's conviction for CSAM. It's like she's just constantly getting beaten down with something that's going on with her brothers and sisters, specifically Josh. It seems like there's no end to a lot of the challenges that she's encountering. So it's been a hard couple of chapters, and then the epilogue comes along. And Jill takes time to really express gratitude for her family, for her mom and dad, and for what she had. And it just really spoke to me because there was a time that I watched the Duggars show and thought, oh my gosh, they're so perfect. I would have loved to have had that when I was growing up because I was pretty lonely as a kid. And then when everything came out about Josh and everything, all the curtains started falling down and you could see what was behind and inside of all the closets, I was really taken aback, and I thought, gosh, I need to re-examine my life. And I kind of turned it into a gratitude thing, and I had had years of counseling and therapy as well when I left for college, and I was finally able to see that I am grateful for what I had, that nobody's life is perfect, that nobody's situation is the best situation. And here we have Jill making a lot of the same statements. In this epilogue, Jill writes, I am grateful for the way Mom and Pops taught us how to treat each other. When you have that many kids living and learning together under one roof, you can't be a micromanager refereeing all their arguments and disagreements. You have to teach them how to get along And Mom in particular was so good at that. She was always encouraging us to think about what the other person was feeling, to empathize and see things from their perspective. I can't imagine stopping in the middle of 19 kids and giving this kind of like psychological lesson about caring about your siblings. Once again, we see Michelle, from Jill's point of view, coming in and being a really active participant in mothering her. She says her dad was really proud of how well they got along, and he would say to people, "They're best friends," he'd say, his eyes dancing with delight. And he was right. We didn't see the little ones as annoying, and we weren't fighting for our parents' attention. We loved each other, and we knew that we were loved in return. Mom and Pops made time for us individually as well. And she goes on to talk about all the times that her mom and dad included them in what they were doing, that they loved them. She said they loved us, and they never ceased to take an opportunity to show us love in action. And then she goes on to say, "I guess things changed with the show, but it's not difficult for me to look back on those days with gratitude. Thanks to the show, we ate well, lived in a beautifully furnished house, traveled the world, and got to feel like we had a sense of purpose and calling as we dedicated ourselves to a ministry." So yes, I am grateful. And I'm skipping over a lot of parts, but I want to kind of give you the point of how I felt about the epilogue. Jill says, "So yes, I am grateful, but I am also realistic. There is much that I can look back on and smile, but I picked up some wounds along the way. It's like roses and thorns, justice and grace. You can recognize the beauty and happy parts of your story, while also recognizing the more difficult parts, and the two can coexist. The highs aren't automatically erased or invalidated by the lows." If you're one of those people who's run to Jessa's YouTube page, or you've gotten on your own social media and had something negative to say about Jill or her sisters or Jim Bob or Michelle, I think you're missing the point of what Jill has to say here. The last thing I want to share with you about the epilogue is that after a lot of challenges that Derek and Jill faced, and, we'll go over some of that as we go further into other chapters. And if you read the book, you'll see much of it in the epilogue as well. After all of those challenges, Jill was finally ready to give birth via a planned C-section to their latest son, Freddie. And she wasn't sure if she'd be able to have any more children, so this was like a joyous situation. "There were no cameras," she wrote, "but I was still a Duggar. Frederick Freddie Dillard came into the world with a shout, and my uterus held up just fine. He had to spend a few days in the NICU since he was a bit early, but there was nothing that anybody was worried about, and he was finally ready to go home." Okay, so Michelle was there for the birth and helped Jill through it. And Jill writes, "Mom rode in the car with me and Freddie as they're coming home. She'd been amazing all through the delivery as well as after it, helping me with the baby, night feedings, and tending to my every need as I recovered from the C-section. We were able to connect in ways we'd not connected in years, and I was grateful for this unexpected gift. When we got to our house, Mom checked her phone. 'It's Pops,' she said. 'He's going to come and get me.' Her voice trailed off. She looked concerned. I glanced at Derek. He looked at me because they had not been seeing Jim Bob and Michelle for like a couple of years at this point. They saw them at the trial and they were kind of keeping their distance. So it was a big deal that Michelle came to the birth of Freddie and helped out. And Michelle and Jill writes, "We both knew the answer to the question that Mom hadn't asked. 'Okay,' I said, 'you should tell Pops to come inside so he can meet Freddie,' said Derek warmly. When Pops arrived a half hour later, he looked around slowly like he was taking it all in. We'd moved houses a month earlier, and this was the first time he'd ever come over. He'd never been to our previous place either, and we'd lived there for 3 years, so this was all new to him. He looked content, but like he was quickly having to redraw a map of how Derek and I lived. I needed to redraw my map too. In previous years, I'd seen him a few times at family events, weddings, funerals, court cases, but never somewhere this quiet or private. He looked different, a little older perhaps. The way he carried himself, there wasn't the same sense of authority and power that he'd once had. As soon as Pops saw baby Freddie, his expression changed. His eyes found their old sparkle, his smile fired up again, of all the many different parts to him. Head of the Duggar household, CEO of Mad Family Inc., politician, public figure. It was plain old Grandpa Duggar, who I found the easiest to love. There was nothing complex there, nothing to worry about. Just a man taking delight in the precious baby that his daughter had just brought into the world. For a long time, we all just stood and smiled, Pops looking at Freddie, us looking at Pops. Jill, Derek, Mom said eventually, would y'all mind if Pops held Freddie? Sure, I said. We should get a photo, too. There's the photo of Michelle and Jim Bob with their son. Through my lens, what I'm thinking as I finish up that epilogue is what I wouldn't give for one more photo with my grandfather. And all of the hard times that we had been through in our lives and that you've been through in your lives, it's a part of what makes us who we are. I love to see that at the end of this book, Jill has so much grace and love, and she says, I love my family. So for those of you who watch this channel, if you dare to join me in this, take a moment to go to someone's social media like Jessa or Joy or Jill and leave them like a positive comment about Jill's book. I said this earlier, like I'm going to go and leave a comment that says, I read Jill's book and it helped me understand like how special your family is and that there's still a lot of love despite everything that's happened. Heart emoji. Okay, chapter 3 is next. I wanted to do a little bit of it now, but I'm too choked up. I hope you guys don't hate me for infusing so much of my own feelings into this. But I would love to hear about what your lens leads you to believe about everything I've been sharing from this book about Jill and what's been going on with the family. We do have a lot of chapters to get through that are not as becoming of the Duggar parents. And those are coming up next. But thank you so much for heading down this rabbit hole with me tonight. I hope that you take a moment to hug your loved ones. And if there's somebody that you've had a really hard time with, just to remember that they probably deserve a little bit of grace as well, even if you are estranged from them, just to say a good thought, a good prayer for them tonight. Much love to all of you. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow as we head down another rabbit hole.